If Napoleon Hill were alive today, he would dominate the world of business and personal success in a way no one could compete with. His 7 revolutionary rules of power have been tested for decades and have transformed thousands of ordinary lives into extraordinary stories of wealth and fulfillment. Ancient secrets of success will be revealed, and your mindset will change forever in ways you never imagined. A journey of transformation, prosperity, and personal power. Get ready. These strategies will revolutionize your financial and personal life. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and comment where you're watching from. You wake up every morning in the same world as billionaires, yet something separates you from them. What is it? Is it luck, connections, money? Or is it something far more subtle, something that Napoleon Hill discovered almost a century ago when he spent 20 years studying the most successful people of his era? Picture this. A man born into poverty in rural Virginia becomes the architect of modern success thinking. He interviews Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, and over 500 other millionaires. He uncovers patterns so powerful that they still govern wealth creation today. Now imagine if that same man could see our world, our technology, our opportunities, our distractions. What would he do differently? How would he outperform everyone around him? You live in an era of unprecedented opportunity, yet most people feel more lost than ever before. The internet has democratized access to information, markets, and people in ways that would have seemed like magic to previous generations. You can start a business from your bedroom, reach millions with a single post, learn from the greatest minds in history with a few clicks, and access tools that give you capabilities that once required entire teams of specialists. You have more computing power in your pocket than NASA used to send humans to the moon. You can connect with anyone, anywhere, at any time. You can learn any skill through online courses, often for free. You can test business ideas with minimal investment. You can build an audience without traditional gatekeepers. You can create and distribute content that reaches global markets instantly. Yet despite all these advantages, most people are more stressed, more confused, and more mediocre than ever before. They have access to infinite information but lack wisdom. They can connect with anyone but feel more isolated. They have endless opportunities but experience paralysis rather than progress. They possess powerful tools but use them for distraction rather than creation. Why this paradox? Because they've forgotten the fundamental principles that separate achievers from dreamers. They've confused having access to tools with knowing how to use them effectively. They've mistaken information for knowledge, connection for relationship, activity for productivity, and motion for progress. They're trying to build extraordinary lives using ordinary thinking. Napoleon Hill understood something that your generation has lost. Success isn't about having more tools. It's about thinking differently. While everyone else chases the latest productivity hack, social media strategy, or technological solution, the real winners are applying timeless principles with surgical precision. They understand that in a world of infinite noise, the person who can focus wins. In a world of endless options, the person with clear purpose dominates. In a world of instant gratification, the person with patience rules. In a world of surface-level connections, the person who builds real relationships thrives. Hill spent 20 years of his life studying the most successful people of his era because he understood something profound. Success follows patterns. These patterns aren't random, they're not based on luck, and they're not dependent on circumstances. They're based on how human psychology actually works, how markets actually respond, how relationships actually develop, and how achievement actually occurs. Consider what Hill observed in his subjects. Andrew Carnegie didn't become the richest man in the world through positive thinking. He became wealthy by understanding how to organize human effort around a clear vision. Henry Ford didn't revolutionize transportation through motivation. He succeeded by applying systematic principles to manufacturing and marketing. Thomas Edison didn't invent the light bulb through inspiration alone. He created it through organized experimentation based on scientific principles. These men thought differently about failure, desire, decision-making, knowledge, relationships, mental control, and their connection to something greater than themselves. They didn't just work hard. Millions of people work hard without achieving anything significant. They didn't just have good ideas. Countless people have good ideas that never become reality. They applied specific mental frameworks that converted their efforts into extraordinary results. Hill realized that if these frameworks could be identified, documented, and taught, then anyone could apply them to achieve similar results in their own field. This wasn't speculation. It was scientific observation applied to human achievement. If success follows patterns, then those patterns can be learned and applied by anyone willing to study and practice them consistently. Consider the paradox you face daily and notice how it reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of how success actually works. You have access to more knowledge than Hill ever did, yet you probably feel less certain about your path than he did about his. You can connect with anyone in the world within seconds, yet you likely feel more isolated than people did when connection required significant effort. You can start a business faster than ever before in history, yet success seems more elusive than it did for previous generations. This isn't coincidence. It's the natural result of approaching a modern world with an outdated mindset. Most people are using industrial age thinking to navigate an information age reality. They're applying strategies designed for scarcity to an environment of abundance. They're using frameworks built for local markets to compete in global markets. They're trying to succeed in a complex, interconnected world using simple, isolated approaches. The fundamental challenge isn't that the world has become more difficult, it's that it's become more complex. Complexity requires different thinking than complication. A complicated problem has many parts, but they follow predictable patterns. A complex problem has many parts that interact in unpredictable ways. Industrial age success was mostly about solving complicated problems efficiently. Information age success is about navigating complex systems intelligently. Hill's principles work precisely because they address the underlying patterns of human psychology and achievement that remain constant regardless of technological change. The tools change, the platforms evolve, the markets shift, but the fundamental principles of how humans create value, build relationships, and achieve goals remain the same. Think about this for a moment. Every social media platform that dominates today will eventually be replaced by something else. Every technology that seems revolutionary now will become obsolete within decades. Every business model that appears unstoppable will eventually be disrupted. But the psychological principles that govern how people make decisions, form relationships, and pursue goals have remained constant throughout human history. This is why studying Hill's work isn't about learning historical curiosities. It's about understanding timeless patterns that will remain relevant regardless of how the world changes. It's about developing capabilities that transfer across industries, technologies, and economic conditions. It's about building success on foundations that don't shift with trends or circumstances. What if the key to extraordinary achievement isn't learning something completely new, but remembering something that's been forgotten? What if Hill's principles, properly understood and applied to today's landscape, could give you an almost unfair advantage over your competition? What if the very complexity that overwhelms most people could become your greatest strategic advantage? Think about the people who dominate your industry, your field, or your area of interest. Study them carefully. Do they work harder than everyone else? Sometimes, but not always. Many people work incredibly hard without achieving significant results. Do they have better credentials than their competitors? Often not. Some of the most successful people in business, technology, and the arts never finished formal education or came from modest backgrounds. Do they have access to better information? Rarely. In today's world, information is largely democratized. The same books, courses, podcasts, and educational resources are available to everyone with internet access. Do they have superior natural talents? Occasionally, but talent without direction often leads to wasted potential, while focused effort with clear direction often beats raw talent. What successful people have is something more subtle and more powerful: clarity of thought in a world of confusion. They have focus in a world of distraction. They have patience in a world of instant gratification. They have principles in a world of pragmatism. They have systems in a world of randomness. They've internalized frameworks that most people have never heard of, or worse, have heard of, but never truly understood or applied consistently. Hill spent his entire adult life studying one fundamental question: what makes some people succeed while others with equal or better opportunities fail? His findings were revolutionary for his time and are even more powerful now because the gap between those who apply these principles and those who don't has widened dramatically. In Hill's era, implementing these principles required tremendous effort and resources. Communication was slow and expensive. Information was scarce and valuable. Travel was difficult and time-consuming. Starting a business required significant capital and physical infrastructure. Marketing required access to traditional media gatekeepers. Building a network meant attending physical events and maintaining correspondence through mail. Today, with the right understanding, you can apply Hill's principles with minimal friction and maximum impact. You can communicate instantly with anyone, anywhere. You can access virtually unlimited information at near zero cost. You can travel globally or work remotely. You can start many types of businesses with minimal capital. You can market directly to your ideal customers. You can build networks through digital platforms and maintain relationships through technology. The same principles that required years to implement in Hill's era can now be applied in months or even weeks. The same strategies that once demanded significant resources can now be executed with creativity and persistence. The same frameworks that once gave moderate advantages can now create exponential results. Hill spent his entire life studying one question: what makes some people succeed while others with equal or better opportunities fail? His findings were revolutionary then and are even more powerful now. In his time, implementing these principles required tremendous effort and resources. Today, with the right understanding, you can apply them with minimal friction and maximum impact. Imagine having a mental framework so powerful that every decision becomes clearer, every challenge becomes manageable, and every opportunity becomes obvious. Picture yourself moving through your day with the quiet confidence of someone who knows exactly where they're going and how to get there. Envision approaching problems not with anxiety about what might go wrong, but with curiosity about what you might discover. Consider what it would feel like to wake up each morning knowing that your actions are aligned with your deepest values and your highest aspirations. What would this level of clarity do to your relationships? When you know who you are and what you stand for, you attract people who share your values and respect your boundaries. You stop trying to please everyone and start building genuine connections with people who matter. You communicate from confidence rather than insecurity, from abundance rather than scarcity, from purpose rather than desperation. What would this clarity do to your income and career? When you understand your unique value and how to communicate it effectively, you command higher compensation. When you can focus your efforts on activities that create the greatest impact, your productivity multiplies. When you can make decisions quickly and stick with them confidently, you outperform people who second-guess themselves constantly. What would this clarity do to your peace of mind? When you're operating from proven principles rather than hoping for luck, you feel secure even in uncertain circumstances. When you understand that you can handle whatever challenges arise, you stop worrying about worst-case scenarios. When you know that your success depends on factors within your control, you stop feeling anxious about factors beyond your control. The 7 rules you're about to discover aren't theoretical concepts borrowed from academic research or philosophical speculation. They're practical tools forged in the real world by people who transformed their lives and shaped history. They've been tested not in laboratories, but in markets, not in surveys, but in the actual lives of people who built fortunes, created innovations, and achieved influence. These principles work because they're based on how reality actually operates, not on how we wish it operated. They align with natural laws rather than fighting against them. They work with human psychology rather than against it. They leverage the way markets actually function rather than how we think they should function. But here's what makes them even more powerful today. The world has become so complex that most people have forgotten how to think simply. While they struggle with information overload, you'll have crystal clear priorities. While they react to every digital ping and notification, you'll be building something meaningful. While they consume other people's content, you'll be creating value that others want to consume. While they chase trends, you'll be following principles that transcend trends. You're living in the most exciting time in human history for people who understand how to think clearly and act systematically. Never before have individuals had so much potential leverage. Never before have the barriers to entry been so low for starting businesses, building audiences, or creating wealth. Never before have the tools for learning, networking, and scaling been so accessible. Yet most people feel overwhelmed rather than empowered by their opportunities. They've confused motion with progress, activity with achievement, and noise with signal. They're playing a game they don't understand with rules they've never learned. They're using strategies designed for industrial-age challenges to solve information-age problems. You're living in the most exciting time in human history, yet most people feel overwhelmed rather than empowered by their opportunities. They've confused motion with progress, activity with achievement, and noise with signal. They're playing a game they don't understand, with rules they've never learned. But what if you could step outside this chaos? What if you could see the patterns that others miss? What if you could apply principles so fundamental that they work regardless of technology, industry, or economic conditions? What if you could develop capabilities that become more valuable as the world becomes more complex? Hill discovered that successful people think differently about 7 key areas that determine everything else: their relationship with failure, their understanding of desire, their approach to decision-making, their use of specialized knowledge, their ability to organize effort, their mastery of their mind, and their connection to something greater than themselves. These aren't personality traits you're born with. They're learnable skills you can develop. They aren't gifts distributed randomly at birth. They're practices you can implement starting today. The relationship with failure determines whether setbacks become stepping stones or stumbling blocks. Most people experience failure as evidence of their inadequacy, but successful people experience failure as information about what needs to be adjusted. This difference in interpretation changes everything about how they respond to challenges and how quickly they recover from difficulties. The understanding of desire determines whether goals create motivation or frustration. Most people have vague wishes that generate anxiety, but successful people have burning obsessions that generate energy. This difference in clarity changes everything about how they direct their efforts and how consistently they pursue their objectives. The approach to decision-making determines whether opportunities are seized or missed. Most people agonize over choices and second-guess their decisions, but successful people make decisions quickly and stand by them confidently. This difference in speed and certainty changes everything about how they respond to opportunities and how much progress they make over time. The use of specialized knowledge determines whether effort creates leverage or just activity. Most people scatter their learning across many areas, but successful people concentrate their knowledge in areas that matter most. This difference in focus changes everything about how much value they create and how quickly they advance in their chosen field. The ability to organize effort determines whether achievements are limited to individual capabilities or expanded through collective action. Most people try to do everything themselves, but successful people understand how to coordinate the efforts of others toward shared objectives. This difference in approach changes everything about the scale of what they can accomplish and the speed at which they can achieve it. The mastery of mental control determines whether thoughts serve their goals or undermine them. Most people let their minds wander randomly, but successful people direct their mental energy purposefully. This difference in mental discipline changes everything about their emotional state, their decision-making quality, and their ability to persist through difficulties. The connection to infinite intelligence determines whether they're limited to their individual insights or have access to wisdom beyond their personal experience. Most people rely only on their conscious reasoning, but successful people learn to tap into deeper sources of guidance and creativity. This difference in perspective changes everything about their ability to recognize opportunities, solve problems, and make breakthrough innovations. These 7 areas work together like instruments in an orchestra. When they're aligned and functioning harmoniously, they create results that seem almost magical to outside observers. When they're misaligned or neglected, they create frustration, confusion, and mediocrity, regardless of how hard someone works or how much talent they possess. The tragedy is that most people spend their entire lives playing small when they could be playing to win. They accept mediocrity as normal, when excellence is available to anyone willing to study and apply proven principles. They react to circumstances when they could be creating circumstances. They follow trends when they could be setting them. They consume what others create when they could be creating what others consume. Your smartphone contains more processing power than the computers that sent humans to the moon, yet you probably use it primarily for entertainment and distraction rather than learning and creation. The same principle applies to your mind. You have capabilities that previous generations couldn't imagine, yet you've been conditioned to think small, move slowly, and accept limitations that don't actually exist in today's world. Hill understood that the mind operates like a radio receiver. It picks up whatever frequency you tune it to. Most people let their mental radio scan randomly, picking up static, noise, and interference from whatever sources happen to be strongest at the moment. Social media feeds, news cycles, and other people's opinions become the primary influences on their thinking. But what if you could tune in to the exact frequency of success? What if you could filter out the noise and focus only on the signals that matter for achieving your most important goals? In Hill's era, information was scarce and valuable, so the challenge was finding good information. Today, information is abundant and mostly worthless, so the challenge is filtering good information from noise. The 7 rules you're about to learn provide that discernment. They help you identify what matters from what doesn't, what's strategic from what's merely tactical, what builds your future from what steals your time. Consider this profound reality. Every morning, millions of people wake up with fundamentally the same basic resources, 24 hours access to technology, and the freedom to choose their actions. Yet by evening, some have moved significantly closer to their dreams, while others have moved further away. Some have created value that didn't exist before, while others have merely consumed value that others created. Some have solved problems that matter, while others have created new problems through poor choices. The difference isn't in their circumstances, their backgrounds, or their starting points. The difference is in their thinking patterns, their decision-making frameworks, and their understanding of how success actually works. The difference is in whether they're applying proven principles or hoping for luck. The difference is in whether they're creating their circumstances or merely reacting to them. What if I told you that Hill, if he were alive today, wouldn't be intimidated by social media algorithms, economic uncertainty, artificial intelligence, or global competition? He would see these as opportunities disguised as obstacles. He would understand that in a world where everyone is trying to stand out by being louder, the real power lies in being clearer. In a world where everyone is trying to move faster, the advantage goes to those who move with intention and purpose. The principles Hill discovered work like natural laws. They're not subject to opinion, culture, or time frame. Gravity doesn't care if you believe in it, and neither do the principles of success. You can either work with them or against them, but you can't ignore them without consequences. You can either apply them systematically or suffer the predictable results of random action. Imagine a world where your thoughts are as organized as your smartphone's file system, where your goals are as clear as your GPS directions, and where your actions are as intentional as a master chef's recipe. Imagine approaching each day not with anxiety about what might happen, but with confidence in what you'll make happen. Imagine building a life based on principles that work regardless of circumstances, rather than hoping that circumstances will somehow work in your favor. Look around you carefully. Really observe what you see in the people moving through their daily lives. What do you notice? People staring at screens with glazed expressions, chasing notifications like addicts chasing their next fix, jumping from opportunity to opportunity like moths drawn to flames they'll never reach. They're busy, yes. They're informed about countless topics that don't matter, certainly. They're connected to hundreds of people they barely know. But are they winning? Are they building anything lasting? Are they moving toward their dreams or simply moving in circles, creating the illusion of progress while remaining fundamentally stuck? You witness this tragedy unfolding daily, and the most heartbreaking part is that you're watching intelligent people with good intentions making the same fundamental mistakes that Hill documented nearly a century ago. They've forgotten the principles of success and replaced them with modern myths that keep them trapped in cycles of mediocrity, disguised as productivity. These aren't lazy people or unintelligent people. Many of them have impressive credentials, work long hours, and genuinely want to improve their lives, but they're applying industrial-age thinking to information-age challenges. They're using strategies designed for simple, predictable environments to navigate complex, rapidly changing realities. They're treating symptoms instead of addressing root causes, and they're confusing motion with progress. Watch how the typical person navigates their day, and you'll understand why so many people feel frustrated despite having access to unprecedented opportunities. They wake up and immediately reach for their phone, flooding their mind with other people's priorities, problems, and perspectives before they've even considered their own. They consume carefully curated highlights from strangers' lives, then wonder why their own life feels inadequate by comparison. They start their day reactive instead of proactive, scattered instead of focused, anxious about things they can't control instead of calm about things they can control. Before they've taken their first conscious breath of the day, they've already surrendered their mental sovereignty to algorithms designed to capture and monetize their attention. They've allowed other people's urgencies to become their priorities. They've programmed their subconscious mind with anxiety-inducing news, envy-generating social media, and stress-creating information that has no relevance to their actual goals or responsibilities. At work, they confuse being busy with being productive, attending meetings that could have been emails, responding to messages that don't require responses, and saying yes to requests that move them further from their goals rather than closer to them. They mistake motion for progress, activity for achievement, and presence for performance. They fill their calendars with obligations but have no clear vision of what they're building through all this activity. They multitask their way into mediocrity, switching between tasks so frequently that they never achieve the deep focus necessary for breakthrough thinking or high-quality work. They respond to every notification, interrupt important work for unimportant communications, and fragment their attention across so many different demands that they become good at nothing while appearing busy with everything. In their personal lives, they consume instead of create, watching other people live their dreams on screens while their own dreams collect dust in the back of their minds. They're experts on fictional characters, but strangers to their own potential. They know more about celebrities' relationships than they do about building meaningful relationships in their own lives. They follow other people's businesses obsessively while neglecting their own opportunities. They spend more time planning their entertainment than planning their future. They invest more mental energy in fantasy sports leagues than in their actual careers. They show more enthusiasm for other people's achievements than for their own possibilities. They become connoisseurs of other people's content while producing nothing meaningful themselves. Let me tell you about Sarah, a composite of countless people you probably recognize, perhaps someone very much like yourself or people in your immediate circle. Sarah graduated with honors from a respected university, landed a good job at a stable company, and has accumulated all the external markers that society uses to define success. She earns a comfortable income that places her well above the median, lives in a nice apartment in a desirable neighborhood, drives a reliable car, and maintains an impressive social media presence that generates steady likes and comments from her network. Yet despite these accomplishments, Sarah feels increasingly empty, stuck, and anxious about her future. She experiences a growing disconnect between what her life looks like from the outside and how it feels from the inside. She has everything she thought she wanted, but nothing she actually values. She's achieved what others consider success, but she doesn't feel successful. Sarah's day begins at 6:30 a.m. when her phone alarm jolts her awake with the same jarring sound that's been conditioning her nervous system for years. Before her feet hit the floor, before she's even fully conscious, she's reaching for her phone and scrolling through notifications that accumulated while she slept. Instagram stories from acquaintances she barely knows, sharing highlight reels of their supposedly perfect lives. LinkedIn posts about career advice she never implements, written by people who aren't significantly more successful than she is. News articles about problems she can't solve in places she'll never visit, designed to generate clicks rather than inform or enlighten. By 7 a.m., before she's eaten breakfast or taken a shower, her mind is already fragmented and pulled in 17 different directions by other people's agendas. She's consumed information about other people's vacations, other people's promotions, other people's relationships, and other people's opinions about politics and social issues. She hasn't spent a single moment considering her own priorities, her own goals, or her own values. She's already given away her mental sovereignty for the day. She rushes through breakfast while checking emails, multitasking her way into a state of low-level anxiety that will persist throughout the day. She reads messages that could wait, responds to requests that aren't urgent, and fills her mind with other people's problems before she's addressed any of her own opportunities. She's training her brain to be reactive rather than proactive, scattered rather than focused, anxious rather than calm. During her commute, instead of using the time for reflection, planning, or learning, she continues consuming other people's content through podcasts about topics she'll never apply, audiobooks she'll never finish, or more social media scrolling. She arrives at work already mentally exhausted from processing information that has no relevance to her goals or responsibilities. At work, Sarah is competent, but not exceptional. She completes tasks adequately, but doesn't create significant value. She follows instructions efficiently, but doesn't solve important problems independently. She's busy from morning until night, attending meetings, responding to emails, completing projects, and participating in office conversations. But she can't point to anything meaningful she's building or any impact she's creating that extends beyond maintaining the status quo. Sarah attends networking events but doesn't build real relationships. She collects business cards and connects with people on LinkedIn, but she doesn't follow up meaningfully or provide value to the people she meets. She treats networking like a transaction rather than relationship building, focusing on what she can get rather than what she can give. She takes online courses but doesn't apply the knowledge. Her browser bookmarks are filled with articles she'll never read. Her online learning platforms have half-completed courses she'll never finish, and her Notes app contains insights she'll never implement. She confuses information consumption with skill development and learning with progress. Sarah sets goals every new year but doesn't develop systems to achieve them. She writes down what she wants to accomplish, feels motivated for a few weeks, then gradually abandons her commitments when the initial enthusiasm fades and the work becomes difficult. She doesn't understand the difference between goals and systems, between outcomes and processes, between motivation and discipline. She wants to start a side business, but never finds the time. She has business ideas that excite her, but she waits for the perfect moment to begin, the complete plan before taking action, and the guarantee of success before risking failure. She studies entrepreneurship endlessly, but never exercises the entrepreneurial muscle through actual practice. Sarah dreams of writing a book, but never writes a page. She has stories to tell and expertise to share, but she waits for inspiration instead of creating through discipline. She plans and researches and outlines, but she never does the fundamental work that creates the thing she claims to want. She plans to exercise regularly, but consistently finds excuses. She joins gyms she doesn't use, buys equipment she doesn't touch, and starts programs she doesn't finish. She treats physical fitness like a temporary project rather than a fundamental lifestyle choice, approaching it with the same sporadic energy she applies to everything else in her life. What's Sarah's real problem? It's not lack of intelligence. She consistently demonstrates that she's smart enough to learn quickly, solve complex problems, and understand sophisticated concepts. It's not lack of opportunity. She lives in an era of unprecedented access to information, tools, markets, and networks that previous generations couldn't have imagined. It's not lack of resources. She has more financial stability, technological capability, and educational access than the vast majority of humans throughout history. Sarah's fundamental problem is that she's forgotten how to think strategically about her own life. She's outsourced her decision-making to algorithms that show her what they think she wants to see, based on data designed to maximize engagement rather than enhance her well-being. She's replaced deep, purposeful thinking with shallow, reactive consumption. She's substituted intentional action with responsive behavior. She's chosen comfort over growth, entertainment over education, and ease over excellence. But the most tragic aspect of Sarah's situation is that she's not consciously making these choices. She's sleepwalking through patterns that feel automatic because she's never questioned them or considered alternatives. She's living according to default settings programmed by other people for their benefit, not hers. Sarah represents millions of people who have forgotten Napoleon Hill's fundamental insight. Success is a mental game played with specific rules. While she's playing checkers with random moves, the rules she needs are for chess with strategic thinking. While she's using a basic map that shows where things are, she needs a compass that shows which direction to go. While she's following temporary tactics that change with trends, she needs timeless strategy that works regardless of circumstances. Watch how Sarah handles challenges, and you'll see the patterns that keep her stuck. When faced with criticism, whether from her boss, her family, or online comments, she becomes defensive instead of curious. She focuses on protecting her ego rather than extracting useful information. She takes feedback personally rather than professionally, emotionally rather than analytically. When confronted with failure, whether a project that doesn't work out, a relationship that ends, or a goal she doesn't achieve, she makes excuses instead of learning lessons. She blames circumstances, other people, bad timing, or unfair conditions, rather than examining what she could have done differently. She treats failure as evidence of her inadequacy rather than information about what needs to be adjusted. When presented with opportunities, whether career advancement, business partnerships, or personal growth challenges, she focuses on what could go wrong instead of what could go right. She analyzes risks obsessively while ignoring potential rewards. She's programmed for survival thinking rather than success thinking, for scarcity rather than abundance, for protection rather than progress. Notice how Sarah approaches her goals, and you'll understand why she never achieves them. She sets resolutions in January with enthusiasm, but no system, then abandons them by March when initial motivation fades. She starts projects with energy but no plan, then stops them when obstacles arise. She makes commitments with good intentions but no structure, then breaks them when competing priorities emerge. Sarah's relationship with money reveals her fundamental misunderstanding of how wealth actually works. She believes money comes from trading time for dollars, so she focuses on getting raises rather than building assets. She thinks rich people are lucky or connected or corrupt, so she plays the lottery instead of investing in developing valuable skills. She assumes success requires connections she doesn't have, so she doesn't bother building the relationships she could develop. She treats money as something that comes from outside rather than something she creates through value. She focuses on cutting expenses rather than increasing income, on saving pennies rather than earning dollars, on protecting what she has rather than building what she could have. She thinks like an employee rather than an entrepreneur, like a consumer rather than a creator, like someone who works for money rather than someone who makes money work for her. What about Sarah's use of technology? She owns devices worth thousands of dollars that could run businesses, create content, build audiences, and generate income, but she uses them primarily for consumption and entertainment. Her smartphone could connect her with mentors, customers, collaborators, and opportunities anywhere in the world, but she uses it mainly to scroll through social media and watch videos. Her laptop could create content that reaches millions of people, build systems that generate passive income, or develop skills that increase her market value, but she uses it mainly to consume content created by others, shop for things she doesn't need, and complete work assigned by other people. She has tools that could change her life, but she uses them to escape from life. Sarah's social circle reinforces her limitations rather than challenging them to expand. She surrounds herself with people who share her complaints, but not her ambitions, who bond over what's wrong with the world instead of what they're going to do to improve their position in it. They discuss problems more than solutions, obstacles more than opportunities, fears more than possibilities. Her conversations revolve around entertainment, gossip, and complaints rather than goals, strategies, and growth. She spends time with people who make her feel comfortable about her current situation, rather than people who inspire her to reach for something better. She chooses relationships that validate her limitations rather than relationships that challenge her to transcend them. When Sarah encounters someone who's actually succeeding at a high level, someone who's building something meaningful or achieving something significant, she doesn't study their methods or seek to understand their thinking. Instead, she questions their motives, assumes they got lucky, believes they had unfair advantages, or imagines they compromised their integrity. It never occurs to her that they might simply be applying principles she doesn't understand, following strategies she's never learned, or thinking in ways she's never considered. She assumes success is either a matter of luck or corruption, never recognizing it as the natural result of applying proven principles consistently over time. Sarah's biggest tragedy isn't her current situation, which is actually quite good by historical standards. Her real tragedy is her unrealized potential. She has capabilities she's never developed, talents she's never explored, and opportunities she's never noticed. She's like someone sitting in a Ferrari complaining about not being able to get anywhere while keeping the car in park and never learning how to drive. But Sarah's story doesn't have to end in mediocrity, and neither does yours. The same principles that could transform her life completely are available to you right now. The same rules that governed success in Hill's era still govern success today, regardless of technological changes, economic conditions, or social trends. The same mental frameworks that created fortunes in the past can create fortunes in the present and future. The difference between Sarah's path toward frustration and your potential path toward fulfillment lies in understanding what Hill really discovered through his 20 years of research. It's not about positive thinking, it's about principled thinking based on how reality actually works. It's not about working harder within the same broken framework, it's about working according to natural laws that govern human achievement. It's not about having better circumstances, it's about creating better circumstances through better thinking and better actions. The gap between where Sarah is and where she could be isn't about intelligence, talent, or resources. It's about awareness, application, and consistency. Sarah has access to the same information you do, the same opportunities you do, and the same potential you do. But she's applying industrial-age thinking to information-age challenges, using scarcity-based strategies in an abundance-based world, and following reactive patterns in an environment that rewards proactive behavior. You've probably seen people like Sarah in your own life, in your workplace, in your social circles, perhaps even in your mirror. Maybe you've been Sarah at various points in your own journey. The good news is that mediocrity is a choice, not a destiny. The patterns that create average results can be replaced with patterns that create extraordinary results. The thinking habits that lead to frustration can be replaced with thinking habits that lead to fulfillment. But this transformation requires more than good intentions or temporary motivation. It requires a fundamental shift in how you approach everything, how you start your day, how you process information, how you make decisions, how you respond to challenges, how you build relationships, how you use your time, and how you think about your potential. What would happen if you stopped following Sarah's example and started following Hill's principles? What would change if you stopped reacting to your environment like a leaf blown by the wind and started creating your environment like an architect designing a building? What would be different if you stopped consuming other people's success stories and started producing your own success story? The 7 rules you're about to learn represent the complete opposite of everything Sarah does. Where she reacts emotionally to circumstances, you'll respond strategically to opportunities. Where she follows the crowd toward mediocrity, you'll lead yourself toward excellence. Where she consumes other people's content passively, you'll create value that others want to consume actively. Where she hopes for things to change, you'll plan for things to improve. Where she wishes for better circumstances, you'll work to create better circumstances. But first, you need to understand why these principles work at a fundamental level and why ignoring them is so costly to your potential. You need to see the logic behind the rules, the science behind the strategy, and the philosophy behind the practice. You need to understand not just what to do, but why it works and how to do it effectively in today's complex environment. The transformation from Sarah's path of reaction to a path of creation isn't about changing everything overnight. That approach usually fails because it's not sustainable. It's about changing how you think about everything, which then naturally changes how you approach everything. It's about replacing reactive patterns with proactive principles, substituting random actions with systematic approaches, and exchanging hope-based planning with principle-based certainty. Every day you delay implementing these principles is another day you remain stuck in patterns that don't serve your highest potential. Every moment you spend consuming instead of creating is a moment of your life you can't recover. Every decision you make based on emotion instead of principle moves you further from what you're truly capable of achieving. The question isn't whether you want to succeed. Everyone wants that, including Sarah. The question is whether you're willing to think and act differently than everyone else, including the current version of yourself. Are you willing to study principles while others chase trends? Are you willing to build systems while others look for shortcuts? Are you willing to play the long game while others demand instant results? The choice is yours, but the consequences are inevitable and predictable. Follow the crowd and you'll get crowd-level results. Think like everyone else, and you'll achieve what everyone else achieves. Act like the majority, and you'll remain in the majority for the rest of your life. Consider Sarah's story carefully because it's a mirror, not just a cautionary tale. How many of her patterns do you recognize in your own life? How many of her mistakes are you currently making? How many of her missed opportunities are you currently missing? But also consider the possibilities that open up when you choose a different path. What if you decided to think like Hill instead of like Sarah? What if you decided to apply timeless principles instead of following temporary trends? What if you decided to create your own success instead of consuming other people's entertainment? And if you decided to do something different, really different, not just cosmetically different, what would that look like? What would change in your daily routine, your weekly patterns, your monthly goals, your yearly planning? How would you approach relationships, opportunities, challenges, and decisions? What kind of person would you need to become to achieve what you really want to achieve? The answers to these questions begin with understanding the principles that Hill discovered and learning how to apply them in today's world. It begins with recognizing that success isn't about circumstances, it's about consciousness. It's not about what happens to you. It's about how you think about what happens to you and what you choose to do about it. The truth about success isn't complicated. It's simply been obscured by noise, distorted by marketing, and diluted by people who've never achieved what they're teaching. Hill didn't discover success principles through theoretical speculation, academic research, or philosophical debate. He identified them through direct observation, systematic documentation, and rigorous verification across hundreds of real-world case studies spanning 2 decades of intensive research. When Andrew Carnegie first challenged Hill to study successful people, Carnegie understood something profound that most people miss. Success follows discoverable patterns just as reliably as any natural phenomenon. Just as water always flows downhill according to gravity, just as plants always grow toward light according to phototropism, just as compound interest always multiplies wealth over time according to mathematical laws, human achievement follows predictable principles that can be identified, understood, and applied by anyone willing to study them seriously. These patterns aren't random, they're not based on luck, and they're not dependent on circumstances beyond your control. They're based on how human psychology actually works in reality, rather than in theory, how markets actually respond to value creation rather than to wishful thinking, how relationships actually develop through mutual benefit rather than one-sided need, and how achievement actually occurs through systematic effort rather than sporadic motivation. Consider the fundamental logic that Hill uncovered through his exhaustive research, and notice how it aligns with everything you observe in the real world. If chaos and confusion consistently lead to mediocrity and frustration, then clarity and focus must lead to excellence and satisfaction. If scattered effort predictably produces scattered results, then concentrated effort must produce concentrated results. If reactive thinking reliably creates reactive outcomes, then proactive thinking must create proactive outcomes. This isn't philosophy or motivation, it's simple cause and effect applied to human behavior and achievement. James Clear understood this when he wrote about atomic habits and how small changes compound into remarkable results. Viktor Frankl recognized it when he observed human behavior in the most extreme circumstances and documented how people's thinking patterns determined their survival and recovery. Carl Jung identified it when he studied the consistent patterns of human psychology across cultures and individuals. Epicteto taught it when he distinguished between what we can and cannot control and showed how this distinction changes everything. Nietzsche embodied it when he wrote about the will to power and the importance of creating your own values rather than accepting society's defaults. These weren't separate discoveries made in isolation. They were different angles on the same fundamental truth about how reality operates and how humans can align themselves with natural laws rather than fighting against them. The principles they identified work consistently because they're not based on cultural trends, technological innovations, or economic conditions that change over time. They're based on unchanging aspects of human nature and universal laws that govern achievement regardless of external circumstances. The 7 rules that Hill identified work like natural laws because they're based on how reality actually operates, not on how we wish it operated or how it appears to operate from a surface-level perspective. They're not motivational concepts designed to make you feel better temporarily. They're operational principles designed to help you achieve results permanently. They don't require belief to work effectively. They require application and consistency. They don't need your permission to be true. They need your practice to be beneficial. Think of your mind as a powerful but undisciplined force, like a river without banks or a fire without containment. Without proper channels and structures, this mental energy floods randomly, creating chaos and destruction rather than progress and creation. But when you build the right frameworks, the mental equivalent of banks for a river, walls for a fire, or code for a computer, that same force becomes productive, powerful, and purposeful. Hill's 7 rules function as those essential mental structures. The first rule, transforming your relationship with failure, functions like a sophisticated filtering and learning system. Where most people experience failure as evidence of their inadequacy and proof that they should quit trying, you learn to experience failure as valuable information about what doesn't work and guidance about what to adjust. Where others experience failure as final and devastating, you experience it as temporary and educational. Where they withdraw their energy and effort after setbacks, you investigate what happened and adjust your approach accordingly. Where they interpret failure as a reflection of their identity, you interpret it as feedback about your strategy. This isn't positive thinking or self-deception, it's scientific thinking applied to personal development and achievement. When Thomas Edison's laboratory burned down, destroying years of work and millions of dollars in equipment, he didn't despair or give up. He called his family to come watch the fire because they'd never see anything like it again. The next morning, he was making detailed plans to rebuild bigger and better. Edison understood what Hill later articulated systematically. Failure is simply data about what needs to be changed, not evidence about what can't be achieved. The second rule, converting vague desires into burning obsessions, operates on the fundamental principle of directed energy and focused intention. Energy that's scattered becomes heat that dissipates without accomplishing anything meaningful. Energy that's focused becomes laser power that can cut through any material. Your desires, when they remain vague and scattered across multiple competing priorities, create frustration, anxiety, and paralysis. Your desires, when they become specific and concentrated on clear outcomes, create momentum, energy, and achievement. This is why Hill emphasized the critical importance of definiteness of purpose over general wishes and good intentions. Watch how truly successful people talk about their goals, and you'll notice they don't use vague language or uncertain terms. They don't say, "I want to be wealthy someday." They say, "I will create a business that generates $2 million in annual revenue within 3 years by solving this specific problem for this specific market." They don't say, "I want to be healthier eventually." They say, "I will exercise for 45 minutes every day and maintain 15% body fat through this specific nutrition and fitness protocol." The specificity isn't just about clarity for its own sake. It's about creating mental conditions that make achievement feel inevitable rather than uncertain. When your subconscious mind has a clear, specific target, it begins working automatically to identify opportunities, resources, and solutions that support that target. When your goals are vague, your subconscious has nothing specific to work toward, so it defaults to maintaining your current situation rather than creating your desired situation. The third rule, making decisions quickly and sticking with them consistently, recognizes that in a world of infinite options and constant change, the ability to make and implement decisions becomes a significant competitive advantage. Successful people don't make perfect decisions. They make decisions perfectly by committing to a clear process and following it consistently. They understand that a good decision executed beats a perfect decision delayed every single time. They know that the psychological cost of indecision is always higher than the practical cost of a wrong decision that can be corrected through new information and adjusted action. Consider the psychology behind decision-making and how it affects everything else in your life. Every time you defer a choice unnecessarily, you train your brain to believe that you're not capable of choosing confidently. Every time you change your mind without gaining new information, you reinforce patterns of instability and uncertainty. Every time you second-guess yourself after making a decision, you create neural pathways of doubt that make future decisions more difficult and stressful. Hill understood that decision-making is like a muscle that either strengthens through use or weakens through neglect. People who make decisions quickly and stick with them develop confidence in their judgment and speed in their execution. People who agonize over choices and frequently reverse their decisions develop anxiety about their capabilities and hesitation in their actions. The fourth rule, acquiring and applying specialized knowledge, operates on the fundamental principle of leverage and differentiation. In Hill's era, knowledge was scarce and therefore automatically valuable. Today, knowledge is abundant and therefore mostly worthless unless it's specialized, applied, and systematically developed into expertise that creates value for others. What's valuable now is the ability to identify which knowledge matters most for your specific goals. Acquire it efficiently through focus, study, and practice, and apply it systematically to create results that others cannot easily replicate. This is why specialists typically earn significantly more than generalists, why experts command higher fees than amateurs, and why focused learning beats scattered education in virtually every field and industry. The tragedy of modern education is that most people treat their learning like a buffet, sampling everything superficially but mastering nothing deeply. They take courses they never apply, read books they never implement, attend seminars they never follow up on, and collect information they never transform into practical skills. They confuse information consumption with knowledge acquisition, and they confuse knowledge acquisition with skill development and expertise building. The fifth rule, organizing collective effort toward shared objectives, recognizes that individual brilliance, while significant, has natural limits, but systematic cooperation and collaboration can achieve virtually anything. Hill called this the master-mind principle, and it's more relevant today than ever before. In an economy increasingly based on networks, relationships, and collaboration, rather than individual effort and competition, your ability to organize and direct collective effort toward mutual benefit determines your ceiling for achievement and impact. Yet most people approach networking and relationship building like they approach dieting. They try it intensely for a short period, see no immediate results, and then abandon it completely. They don't understand that relationships, like compound interest, grow slowly and almost imperceptibly at first, then dramatically and obviously over time. They focus on what they can get from others instead of what they can give to others, on what they need instead of what they can contribute, on short-term transactions instead of long-term relationship building. The sixth rule, gaining control of your mental environment, operates on the understanding that your environment shapes your thoughts more than you realize. Your thoughts shape your actions more than you admit, and your actions shape your results more than anything else. If this chain of causation is accurate, then controlling your mental environment becomes the ultimate leverage point for changing your life systematically and permanently. This is why Hill emphasized the critical importance of autosuggestion and mental programming, why meditation practices are found in every high-performance discipline and achievement system, and why successful people are extraordinarily careful about what they allow into their minds through media, conversations, and associations. Consider the average person's mental diet, and you'll understand why so many people feel anxious, unfocused, and dissatisfied despite having access to unprecedented opportunities. They start their day with news designed to create anxiety and urgency. They consume entertainment designed to encourage passivity and consumption. They engage with social media designed to generate envy, comparison, and inadequacy. Then they wonder why they feel stressed, scattered, and unsuccessful. They're consuming psychological junk food consistently and expecting mental health and clarity. They're feeding their minds anxiety-producing, focus-destroying, confidence-undermining content, and then trying to think clearly, act decisively, and feel confident. It's like trying to run a marathon while eating candy bars and drinking soda. The inputs don't support the desired outputs. The seventh rule, connecting with infinite intelligence, recognizes that your individual capabilities, while significant, are naturally limited to your personal experience, knowledge, and perspective. But your ability to tap into something greater than yourself, whether you call it intuition, divine guidance, collective wisdom, or creative intelligence, multiplies your effectiveness exponentially by giving you access to insights, solutions, and opportunities that your conscious mind alone cannot generate. This isn't about religion or spirituality necessarily. It's about recognizing patterns that exist beyond your current awareness, following hunches that lead to unexpected opportunities, and trusting the wisdom that emerges when your analytical mind stops trying to control everything and allows deeper intelligence to surface and guide your actions. History's greatest achievements have consistently involved people who could sense opportunities that others missed, who could recognize patterns that weren't obvious to conventional thinking, who could trust insights that couldn't be logically proven at the time, but later proved to be remarkably accurate and valuable. They understood that extraordinary success requires both analytical thinking and intuitive knowing, both logical planning and inspired action, both systematic effort and creative breakthrough. These 7 rules work synergistically, meaning their combined effect is greater than the sum of their individual parts. Your transformed relationship with failure makes you willing to take intelligent risks that others avoid out of fear. Your burning desire gives you the energy and persistence to continue when others quit, because the work becomes difficult. Your decisive action creates momentum that attracts opportunities and resources. Your specialized knowledge gives you advantages and capabilities that others cannot easily replicate. Your organized effort multiplies your individual capabilities through the power of collaboration and leverage. Your mental control keeps you focused on what matters while others are distracted by what doesn't. Your connection to infinite intelligence guides your direction and timing in ways that logical analysis alone cannot provide. When these principles work together harmoniously, they create what Hill called the master key, a mental framework that seems to unlock opportunities automatically, solve problems effortlessly, and create possibilities that didn't exist before. It's not magic or mysticism. It's applied psychology based on how success actually works in the real world, combined with how human potential actually develops when it's properly directed and systematically cultivated. The reason most people don't apply these principles consistently isn't because they're difficult to understand intellectually. Most of them are actually quite simple and logical. The reason is that they're different from how most people have been conditioned to think and act. They require thinking in ways that feel unnatural at first, especially in a culture that promotes reactive behavior, instant gratification, and following the crowd rather than thinking independently. These principles demand acting in ways that go against social conditioning that teaches you to avoid failure, seek approval, delay decisions, consume rather than create, work alone rather than collaborate, let your mind wander rather than directing it purposefully, and rely only on logical analysis rather than trusting deeper wisdom. They insist on patience in a culture of instant gratification, focus in a world of constant distraction, and principle-based action in an environment of pragmatic compromise. They require you to think long-term when everyone around you is thinking short-term, to build systems when others are looking for shortcuts, and to develop capabilities when others are seeking quick fixes. But here's what makes these rules so powerful in today's world. Everyone else has forgotten them or never learned them in the first place. While your competition is chasing the latest productivity hack, you'll be applying time-tested principles that have worked for centuries. While they're distracted by trends that change monthly, you'll be guided by truths that remain constant across decades. While they're reacting to circumstances that feel random and overwhelming, you'll be creating circumstances that feel purposeful and manageable. The literature of human achievement, from ancient philosophers like Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, to modern researchers like Carol Dweck and Angela Duckworth, from classical thinkers like Benjamin Franklin and Ralph Waldo Emerson, to contemporary authors like Stephen Covey and Cal Newport, consistently identifies the same fundamental patterns and principles. Success isn't about discovering something completely new that's never been known before. It's about applying something that's always been true, but is rarely practiced consistently. Hill spent 20 years documenting these principles because he understood that patterns of success could be identified, studied, analyzed, and systematically replicated by anyone willing to invest the time and effort required to understand and apply them. He believed that if you could learn to think like successful people think and act like successful people act, you could achieve what successful people achieve regardless of your starting point, background, or current circumstances. This wasn't wishful thinking or motivational speculation. It was logical conclusion based on empirical evidence gathered through systematic observation and verification. If success follows patterns, then those patterns can be learned. If those patterns can be learned, then they can be taught. If they can be taught, then they can be applied by anyone willing to study and practice them consistently over time. The question isn't whether these principles work. Decades of application by thousands of people have proven their effectiveness repeatedly. The question is whether you'll work with them systematically and persistently. The choice isn't whether they're true. Their truth has been demonstrated consistently across different industries, cultures, and time periods. The choice is whether you'll apply their truth to your specific life and goals starting now, rather than someday when conditions feel perfect. But understanding principles intellectually is very different from applying them practically. Knowledge without application remains powerless. Insight without implementation stays meaningless. Comprehension without consistent practice produces no results. The gap between knowing what to do and actually doing what you know determines everything about whether you join the small percentage of people who achieve extraordinary results or remain among the majority who achieve ordinary results. Consider how these principles would change your approach to every area of your life if you applied them consistently. How would you handle criticism differently if you truly understood that failure is feedback rather than condemnation? How would you pursue your goals differently if you converted vague wishes into burning obsessions with specific targets and deadlines? How would you navigate opportunities differently if you made decisions quickly and committed to them fully? How would you develop your career differently if you focused on building specialized knowledge in areas that create the most value? How? Would you approach relationships differently if you understood how to organize collective effort toward mutual benefit? How would you manage your daily experience differently if you took complete control of your mental environment? How would you solve problems differently if you learned to access wisdom beyond your individual perspective? These aren't hypothetical questions, they're practical considerations that determine the trajectory of your life. Every day you delay implementing these principles is another day you remain limited by patterns that don't serve your highest potential. Every month you postpone applying this knowledge is another month you spend hoping for circumstances to change instead of changing your approach to circumstances. Every year you wait for motivation instead of building discipline is another year you watch other people achieve what you could achieve if you applied what you now understand. Time doesn't pause while you decide whether to act on what you know. Opportunities don't wait while you gather more information or build more confidence. Your potential doesn't increase while you delay applying what could unlock it. The principles Hill discovered work in today's world because they're based on unchanging aspects of human psychology and achievement that remain constant, regardless of technological advancement, economic conditions, or social trends. The tools change, the platforms evolve, the markets shift, but the fundamental patterns of how humans create value, build relationships, and achieve meaningful goals remain remarkably consistent. This is why studying Hill's work isn't about learning historical curiosities or outdated strategies. It's about understanding timeless patterns that will remain relevant and powerful regardless of how dramatically the world continues to change around you. It's about developing capabilities that transfer across industries, technologies, and economic conditions, rather than skills that become obsolete when circumstances change. What would happen if you stopped looking for new methods and started applying proven principles with consistent discipline? What would change if you stopped seeking temporary motivation and started building permanent systems based on natural laws? What would be different if you stopped hoping for success and started systematically engineering it through the application of principles that have created every significant achievement in human history? Stop theorizing. Stop analyzing. Stop preparing. Start implementing immediately. The principles you've learned mean absolutely nothing without consistent, systematic application, and application begins with specific actions you can take today, not someday when you feel more ready or when circumstances feel more favorable. Hill didn't study successful people to create philosophical concepts for academic discussion. He studied them to identify practical behaviors that anyone could adopt, practice, and benefit from regardless of their starting point, background, or current situation. The gap between knowledge and transformation isn't bridged by more learning. It's bridged by immediate application of what you already understand. The difference between people who achieve extraordinary results and people who remain stuck in ordinary patterns isn't intelligence, talent, or resources. It's the willingness to act on proven principles consistently, even when they don't feel like it, even when it's difficult, even when results aren't immediately obvious. Transform your relationship with failure through the practice of intelligent failure analysis, turning every setback into a source of valuable information rather than a source of discouragement. Every time something doesn't go according to your plan or expectations, instead of emotional reaction that wastes energy and creates nothing useful, conduct a systematic review that extracting maximum learning from the experience. Develop a structured approach to failure analysis by asking yourself these specific questions. What exactly did I expect to happen? And what were my assumptions about how things would unfold? What actually happened instead? And where did reality differ from my expectations? What specific factors contributed to this difference? Were they within my control or outside my influence? What can I learn from this experience that will make me more effective in the future? What will I do differently next? Time I encounter a similar situation, write these answers down in detail, creating a failure log that becomes your most valuable learning resource over time. Most people try to forget their failures as quickly as possible, but you'll study them systematically to extract insights that make you more capable and resilient. This practice transforms failure from a source of pain and embarrassment into a source of power and improvement. When your business proposal gets rejected, don't sulk or make excuses. Study it systematically. What aspects of your proposal were strongest? Which parts were weakest? How could you have presented your ideas more persuasively? What questions or objections arose that you could have anticipated and addressed proactively? How can you improve your preparation and presentation for next time? When your workout routine breaks down after a few weeks, don't quit or blame your lack of willpower. Analyze what caused the breakdown. Was your routine too ambitious for your current fitness level? Did you fail to plan for obstacles like busy work schedules or family obligations? What environmental changes could you make to support consistency? How could you design a routine that's more sustainable and realistic? When your relationship strategy fails to create the connection you wanted, don't blame the other person or declare that relationships are impossible. Examine what you could have done differently. Were your expectations realistic? Did you communicate clearly and honestly? Were you focused on giving value or getting value? What social skills could you develop to become more effective in future interactions? Practice failure in controlled environments where the stakes are low, but the learning is high. Deliberately put yourself in situations where failure is safe but educational. Apply for positions that are slightly beyond your current qualifications to practice interviewing and learn what skills you need to develop. Propose ideas that stretch your communication abilities and challenge you to think more clearly. Start projects that require capabilities you haven't fully developed yet, forcing you to grow in the process. The goal isn't to fail. The goal is to become so comfortable with the possibility of failure that it never controls your decisions or limits your willingness to pursue opportunities. When you're not afraid of failure, you're free to take intelligent risks that fearful people avoid. When failure becomes information rather than condemnation, you recover quickly and adjust intelligently rather than withdrawing and giving up. Convert your desires into burning obsessions through the daily practice of goal visualization and mental rehearsal that programs your subconscious mind to work automatically toward your objectives. Don't just think about what you want occasionally when you feel motivated. Experience it mentally with such intensity and consistency that your subconscious mind begins treating your goals as inevitable realities rather than distant possibilities. Spend exactly 20 minutes every morning visualizing your goals as already achieved, engaging all your senses to make the experience as vivid and real as possible. See yourself living in your ideal home, noticing specific details about the architecture, furnishings, and environment. Experience yourself running your successful business, feeling the satisfaction of serving customers, managing employees, and making decisions that create value. Imagine yourself enjoying your ideal relationship, sensing the connection, trust, and mutual support. Visualize yourself maintaining perfect health, feeling strong, energetic, and confident in your physical capabilities. But don't just visualize the outcomes. Experience the emotions of achievement with the same intensity you would feel if these things were already real. Feel the satisfaction of accomplishing something meaningful. Experience the pride of overcoming obstacles and developing capabilities you didn't have before. Sense the confidence that comes from realizing your potential and creating the life you actually want rather than settling for whatever circumstances provide. This isn't daydreaming or escapism, it's mental programming based on how your subconscious mind actually works. You're creating neural pathways that make success feel familiar and natural rather than foreign and uncomfortable. You're programming your mind to notice opportunities, resources, and solutions that support your goals rather than problems, obstacles, and reasons why things won't work. Write down your primary goal every single day using exactly the same words, not because you might forget what you want, but because repetition creates mental grooves that guide your actions automatically toward what you've programmed as important. Hill called this autosuggestion, and it's one of the most powerful tools for aligning your conscious intentions with your subconscious programming. Choose one primary goal that matters more than anything else, and write it in present tense as if it's already achieved. I am successfully running a business that generates $500,000 in annual revenue by helping small business owners solve their marketing challenges. Write this exact statement every morning and every evening, engaging your emotions as you write it, making it feel real and inevitable rather than distant and uncertain. Accelerate your decision-making through the implementation of decision deadlines and pre-established decision criteria that eliminate the confusion and emotional turmoil that typically slow down progress. For every decision you face, set a specific deadline for making the choice based on the significance and complexity of the situation. Small decisions like where to eat lunch or which book to read next get 30 minutes maximum. Medium decisions like which job offer to accept or which apartment to rent get 24 hours maximum. Major decisions like which business to start or who to marry get 1 week maximum. When the deadline arrives, make the decision based on the information available at that time. No extensions, no exceptions, no additional research unless truly essential information is missing. This forces you to gather information efficiently, consider options systematically, and commit to choices confidently rather than agonizing indefinitely over possibilities that may never materialize. Develop decision criteria before you need them, creating clear standards that guide your choices and eliminate most of the confusion and second-guessing that plague indecisive people. What factors will you consider when choosing business partners? Write down the specific qualities, capabilities, and values that matter most to you. What standards will guide your career choices? Identify the specific elements that make opportunities attractive or unattractive to you. What principles will determine your relationship decisions? Clarify the characteristics and behaviors that you find essential, desirable, or unacceptable in potential partners. Write these criteria down and refer to them when decisions arise. This eliminates most of the emotional turmoil and analytical paralysis that typically accompany important choices. Instead of starting from scratch every time you face a decision, you simply evaluate options against pre-established standards and choose based on the best fit rather than perfect certainty. Practice making quick decisions on small matters to build your decision-making muscle systematically. Which restaurant to visit when you're hungry? Decide within 30 seconds based on your current preferences rather than researching reviews and comparing options indefinitely. What book to read next from your list? Choose immediately based on what feels most relevant to your current goals rather than analyzing every option. Which route to take home from work? Pick one without deliberation based on your immediate preference rather than calculating the optimal path. Every small decision you make quickly strengthens your ability to make big decisions confidently. Decision-making is a skill that improves with practice, and practicing on low-stakes choices builds the capability you need for high-stakes choices that determine the direction of your life. Build specialized knowledge through focused learning and systematic application that creates real capabilities rather than superficial familiarity. Identify the 3 most important skills for your success based on your specific goals and industry, then dedicate specific time slots to developing them systematically rather than scattering your learning across dozens of topics that may or may not be relevant. Don't try to learn everything. Focus your effort on the few skills that will create the greatest leverage in your life. If you want to build a business, focus on sales, marketing, and finance, rather than trying to become competent in every aspect of business management. If you want to advance in your career, identify the specific technical and interpersonal skills that matter most in your field, rather than pursuing general professional development. Implement the 20-minute rule for daily learning that builds expertise systematically over time. Every day, spend exactly 20 minutes studying your chosen specialty through focused, intentional practice. Read books written by recognized experts in your field. Watch educational videos created by practitioners who've achieved the results you want. Listen to podcasts featuring people who've solved the problems you're trying to solve. Practice specific skills that directly contribute to your goals. Not more than 20 minutes, not less than 20 minutes. Consistency matters more than intensity when building expertise. 20 minutes of focused learning every day for a year creates 121 hours of concentrated study, equivalent to 3 full-time work weeks dedicated to your development. That's enough focused attention to develop real competence in almost any skill if the learning is systematic and the practice is deliberate. Apply what you learn immediately rather than waiting until you've mastered concepts completely. Don't wait until you've finished reading a book to implement its insights. Apply new ideas within 24 hours of learning them. Take action on new insights while they're fresh and while you're motivated. Use new skills while you're excited about practicing them rather than waiting for perfect conditions or complete confidence. This creates a learning loop that accelerates your development exponentially because you're not just consuming information, you're testing it, refining it, and integrating it into your actual capabilities through real-world application. Organize effort through strategic relationship building and systematic networking that creates mutual value rather than one-sided benefit. Make a comprehensive list of 50 people who could potentially help you achieve your goals through collaboration, guidance, resources, or opportunities. These might include potential mentors who've achieved what you want to achieve, collaborators who have complementary skills, customers who would benefit from your products or services, advisors who have relevant expertise, or peers who share similar ambitions and challenges. Research each person thoroughly before reaching out. Understand their current challenges, interests, and goals by studying their work, reading their content, following their social media, and learning about their businesses or careers. Don't approach relationships from a position of need. Approach them from a position of value. Find ways to help them before asking for anything in return. Reach out to exactly one person on your list every week, not to sell them something or ask for immediate favors, but to offer genuine assistance, share valuable information, express sincere appreciation for their work, or propose collaboration that benefits both parties. Build relationships before you need them, invest in people before you need their help. Create a network based on mutual value and shared interests rather than one-sided need and opportunistic requests. Send a brief personalized message that demonstrates you've done your research and that you're focused on giving rather than getting. I've been following your work on sustainable manufacturing, and I was particularly impressed by your recent article about reducing waste in production processes. I've been working on a similar challenge in my company, and I developed a solution that might be relevant to your industry. Would you be interested in a brief conversation where I could share what I've learned and get your perspective on its broader applications? Create opportunities for collaboration by starting projects that require other people's involvement and that provide value to everyone who participates. Launch a mastermind group in your industry where professionals meet monthly to share challenges, insights, and opportunities. Organize a conference or workshop that brings experts together to address important problems. Start a podcast featuring leaders in your field, giving them a platform to share their expertise while building your own network and reputation. Initiate joint ventures that benefit all parties involved, rather than waiting for others to invite you into their projects. Don't wait for opportunities to collaborate. Create them systematically by identifying problems that require diverse skills and perspectives to solve effectively. Master your mental environment through rigorous control of your inputs and systematic expansion of your perspective. Conduct a comprehensive audit of everything you consume mentally throughout your day. What news sources do you check habitually? What social media accounts do you follow? What podcasts do you listen to? What television shows do you watch? What conversations do you engage in regularly? What books and articles do you read? Eliminate every source of negativity, distraction, and mental pollution that doesn't serve your goals or enhance your capabilities. Unfollow social media accounts that create envy, anxiety, or distraction. Stop watching news programs that focus on problems you can't solve and events you can't influence. Avoid conversations that revolve around complaints, gossip, and negativity rather than opportunities, solutions, and growth. Implement the 5-3-1 rule for information consumption that keeps you informed and growing without overwhelming your mental capacity. Follow exactly 5 carefully chosen news sources that provide essential information without sensationalism, bias, or anxiety-inducing content. Subscribe to exactly 3 educational podcasts or video channels directly related to your goals and areas of interest. Read exactly 1 book per month that challenges your thinking, develops your skills, or expands your perspective on important topics. This selective approach keeps you informed about what matters while protecting your mental energy from the constant stream of irrelevant information that most people consume unconsciously. Quality over quantity in information consumption allows you to think more clearly, and focus more effectively on what actually matters for your success and well-being. Practice mental control through daily meditation or reflection periods that develop your ability to direct your thoughts purposefully rather than letting them wander randomly. Spend exactly 15 minutes each morning in quiet contemplation, focusing your mind, clarifying your priorities, and setting your intention for the day ahead. This isn't about emptying your mind or achieving some mystical state. It's about directing your mind toward what matters most and developing the discipline to maintain focus despite distractions. Use this time to review your goals, visualize your success, and prepare mentally for the challenges and opportunities ahead. Practice maintaining attention on what you choose rather than being pulled toward whatever demands attention most loudly. Create a physical environment that supports mental clarity and focus. Organize your workspace to minimize distractions and maximize efficiency. Remove visual clutter that fragments your attention. Establish boundaries around your time and space that protect your ability to concentrate on important work. Turn off notifications during focus periods. Close unnecessary applications and browser tabs. Inform others when you're unavailable for interruptions. Connect with infinite intelligence through regular periods of creative thinking and intuitive problem-solving that access wisdom beyond your individual perspective and analytical capabilities. Set aside time each week for unstructured thinking about your biggest challenges and most important opportunities. Don't try to force solutions through logical analysis alone. Allow insights to emerge naturally from deeper levels of consciousness. Go for walks without devices, music or podcasts, giving your mind space to process information and generate insights without external input. Sit quietly without distractions, letting your thoughts settle and allowing clarity to emerge naturally. Take baths without books or entertainment, creating an environment where deeper wisdom can surface without competing with immediate stimulation. Keep an insight journal where you record ideas, hunches, and insights that occur during these quiet periods of reflection. Don't judge these thoughts or try to evaluate them immediately, just capture them for later consideration. Review your insights weekly to identify patterns and possibilities you might have missed in the moment. Often, the solutions to your biggest problems emerge when you stop trying so hard to find them through forced analysis. Practice following your intuition on small matters to develop trust in your inner guidance and learn to distinguish between genuine insight and wishful thinking. When you have a feeling about which route to take to work, which person to call, or which opportunity to pursue, follow that feeling and observe the results. When you sense that something isn't right about a situation or person, pay attention to that feeling and investigate further rather than dismissing it as irrational. Not every hunch will be correct, but you'll gradually learn to recognize the difference between genuine intuitive guidance and emotional reaction, between deeper wisdom and surface-level preference. As you develop this capability, you'll find that you often know the right course of action before you can logically explain why it's right. Handle criticism and negative feedback by applying the information extraction method that separates useful insights from emotional reactions. When someone criticizes your work, ideas, or approach, resist the immediate urge to defend yourself or argue with their perspective. Instead, focus on extracting any useful information from their feedback while ignoring the emotional charge or personal attack. Ask yourself these specific questions. Is there any truth in what they're saying that I should consider? What can I learn from their perspective that might help me improve? How can I use this feedback to become more effective, regardless of how it was delivered? What valid points are they making that I might have missed in my own analysis? Thank them for their input, regardless of how it was delivered. Then apply what's useful while discarding what isn't. This approach allows you to benefit from feedback without being emotionally derailed by criticism. You maintain your power and composure while extracting maximum value from the interaction. Manage distractions by creating focus blocks in your schedule that protect your most important work from interruptions. Identify your 3 most important tasks each day and schedule specific times to work on them without any interruptions. Turn off all notifications, close unnecessary applications, inform others that you're unavailable during these periods, and commit to working on only one task at a time. Start with 30-minute focus blocks and gradually extend them as your concentration improves. Most people dramatically underestimate their capacity for sustained focus because they've trained themselves to switch between tasks constantly. Deep focus is a skill that develops with practice, and protecting time for uninterrupted work is essential for producing high-quality results. Deal with pressure and stress by implementing the pause and perspective technique that prevents emotional reactions from controlling your decisions. When you feel overwhelmed, pressured, or stressed, take a 60-second pause before responding to the situation. During this pause, ask yourself these clarifying questions. What's really at stake here? How will this matter in 5 years? What would Hill do in this situation? What's the most effective response rather than the most emotional response? This brief reflection usually reveals that the pressure is self-created and that the situation is more manageable than it initially appeared. Most stress comes from imagining worst-case scenarios rather than dealing with actual problems. Most pressure comes from trying to control things that aren't controllable rather than focusing on things that are controllable. Address insecurity and self-doubt through the practice of evidence-based confidence building that grounds your self-assurance in facts rather than feelings. Keep a detailed record of your achievements, compliments received, problems solved, skills developed, and progress made over time. When self-doubt arises, review this concrete evidence of your capabilities rather than trying to think your way out of negative emotions. Your confidence should be based on demonstrated competence rather than positive thinking or emotional manipulation. Build your self-assurance on a foundation of actual accomplishments, proven abilities, and documented progress rather than hopes, wishes, or theoretical potential. Remember that implementation separates dreamers from achievers in every field and every endeavor. Every principle you've learned is worthless without consistent action. Every insight you've gained is meaningless without systematic application. Every technique you've discovered is powerless without disciplined practice over time. Start today. Start right now. Choose one principle and implement it immediately rather than waiting for perfect conditions or complete preparation. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Create the perfect moment through decisive action. Don't wait for motivation to strike. Create motivation through movement and momentum. Don't wait for confidence to emerge. Create confidence through competence developed through practice. Your life changes when your habits change systematically. Your habits change when your actions change consistently. Your actions change when your thinking changes fundamentally. And your thinking changes when you consistently apply proven principles instead of hoping for luck, waiting for inspiration, or expecting circumstances to improve automatically. These aren't suggestions or recommendations. They're instructions for success that have worked for everyone who's applied them consistently. These aren't options you can choose or ignore based on preference. They're requirements for achievement that operate like natural laws. These aren't theories you can debate or modify based on opinion. They're practices that have created every significant achievement in human history. The question isn't whether these methods work effectively. The question is whether you'll work with these methods consistently. The decision isn't whether they're powerful enough to create results. The decision is whether you'll be disciplined enough to apply them systematically until results become inevitable. Picture yourself standing as a master sculptor before a massive block of pristine marble, chisel in hand, vision clear in your mind. Within that seemingly solid stone lies your masterpiece, your ideal life, your highest potential, your greatest possible contribution to the world around you. But the masterpiece doesn't emerge through wishful thinking, positive affirmations, or hopeful waiting. It emerges through careful, persistent, skillful removal of everything that doesn't belong to your vision. Every chip you make with your chisel matters significantly. Every strike must be intentional and purposeful. Every day you work with dedication and precision, the true form becomes clearer and more beautiful. You are simultaneously both the sculptor and the sculpture, both the artist and the art, both the creator and the creation. You have the power to shape yourself according to your deepest vision and highest values, but you also bear the responsibility to do the daily work that such vision requires. The marble doesn't care about your excuses, your moods, or your temporary lack of motivation. The stone doesn't respond to your emotions, your fears, or your self-doubt. It only yields to consistent, purposeful action, guided by clear intention and sustained by unwavering commitment. What does this sculptor metaphor mean for your daily life and moment-to-moment choices? It means that every decision you make is either a deliberate chip toward revealing your masterpiece or a careless crack that damages your work. Every habit you consciously develop either reveals your true potential or obscures it under layers of mediocrity. Every relationship you choose to build either supports your vision and elevates your capabilities, or undermines your progress and diminishes your possibilities. Every thought you deliberately entertain either moves you closer to your ideal self or further away from what you're capable of becoming. The master sculptor doesn't waste time, energy, or attention on random strikes that serve no purpose. Neither should you waste your precious time, limited energy, or valuable attention on random actions that don't contribute to your larger vision. Every day, ask yourself these fundamental questions. What am I sculpting today through my choices and actions? Which parts of my current life need to be carefully carved away to reveal my true potential? Which aspects of my character need to be refined and polished? What features of my ideal future need to be revealed through today's deliberate work? The sculptor understands that the masterpiece emerges gradually through patient, persistent effort rather than dramatic, sudden transformation. Each day's work may seem insignificant when viewed in isolation, but over months and years, the accumulated effect of consistent effort creates something extraordinary. Your life transformation follows the same pattern. Daily choices that seem small compound into remarkable results over time. Now shift your perspective and imagine yourself as a mighty river flowing with purpose and persistence toward the vast ocean of possibility. A river doesn't fight directly against obstacles with brute force. It finds a way around them with patient persistence or gradually wears them down through constant, gentle contact. It doesn't waste energy trying to flow uphill against gravity. It naturally follows the path of least resistance while steadily maintaining its ultimate direction toward its destination. It doesn't stop flowing when it encounters rocks, fallen trees, or narrow passages. It shapes itself to flow around or through obstacles while simultaneously shaping them through constant contact over time. You possess this same fluid power within you. When you encounter obstacles in your path toward success, whether they're economic challenges, social resistance, technical difficulties, or personal limitations, you don't need to blast through them with overwhelming force or give up when direct confrontation proves ineffective. You can flow around them with creative patience, gradually wear them down with persistent effort, or find alternative routes while maintaining your ultimate direction and never losing sight of your destination. What does river-like thinking look like in your daily practice and decision-making? When someone tells you that your goal is impossible or unrealistic, you don't waste energy arguing or defending your dreams. You simply continue flowing steadily toward your objective, knowing that persistence over time proves possibilities that logic cannot predict. When economic conditions change or markets shift unexpectedly, you don't panic or abandon your course. You adapt your methods and strategies while maintaining your destination and vision. When your current approach isn't producing the results you want, you don't force it harder or give up entirely. You find a new path, develop different capabilities, or adjust your timeline while keeping your ultimate vision crystal clear. The river teaches you profound lessons about patience and persistence that apply directly to your success journey. A river doesn't rush frantically when the terrain becomes difficult or dangerous, and it doesn't slow down lazily when the path becomes easy and smooth. It maintains consistent movement toward its destination, regardless of external conditions, obstacles, or temporary setbacks. It trusts completely that consistent flow in the right direction will eventually lead to the vast ocean of unlimited possibility. But the river also teaches you about the incredible power that comes from focused, persistent effort applied consistently over time. When necessary, rivers can carve through solid mountains, reshape entire landscapes, and create completely new paths where none existed before. This awesome power doesn't come from force, aggression, or dramatic action. It comes from relentless consistency applied in the right direction over extended periods of time. Your goals may seem as immovable and permanent as ancient mountains today, but your consistent daily actions are like water flowing steadily toward them. Given enough time, persistence, and focused direction, you will find a way through, around, over, or under any obstacle that appears to block your path. The key is maintaining your flow consistently, regardless of temporary obstacles or apparent impossibilities. Consider now the powerful metaphor of a lighthouse standing tall and unmovable on a rocky coastline, weathering every storm that nature can provide. In the darkness of night, when fierce storms rage across the sea and massive waves crash violently against the shore, the lighthouse remains absolutely steady, its bright beam cutting clearly through the chaos to guide ships safely to harbor. It doesn't chase after ships in distress to rescue them directly. It simply maintains its position on solid ground and keeps its light shining brightly and consistently. Ships that choose to follow its guidance reach safety and success. Ships that ignore its beacon often crash tragically against hidden rocks and dangerous obstacles. You are called to become a lighthouse in your own life and in the lives of everyone around you. This doesn't mean you need to rescue every person you encounter or solve every problem you discover. It means you need to establish yourself firmly on solid principles, maintain your position steadily, regardless of external storms and chaos, and keep your light shining consistently so others can find their way to success by following your example. What does lighthouse living look like in practical terms? It means you don't change your core values, fundamental principles, or essential character based on temporary circumstances, social pressure, or convenient opportunities. You don't dim your light or compromise your standards to make others feel better about their own darkness or mediocrity. You don't abandon your principles because they're temporarily unpopular, socially challenging, or economically disadvantageous. You stand firm on your foundation of proven principles and let your consistent example guide others toward their own success and fulfillment. The lighthouse teaches you about influence without force, persuasion without manipulation, and leadership without domination. It doesn't grab ships and physically pull them to safety. It provides clear guidance and lets them choose whether to follow that guidance to safety or ignore it and face the consequences. Similarly, you influence others most powerfully not through argument, persuasion, or manipulation, but through consistent demonstration of what becomes possible when someone lives according to sound principles consistently over time. But the lighthouse also teaches you about resilience, stability, and unshakable strength in the face of adversity. Storms will inevitably come to test your resolve. Waves of criticism, doubt, and opposition will crash against your foundation regularly. Critics will question your position, your methods, and your motives. Difficulties will test your commitment to your principles and your willingness to maintain your standards when doing so becomes challenging or costly. Like the lighthouse, your strength and effectiveness come not from avoiding these challenges or pretending they don't exist, but from being so well-founded on solid principles that no external force can move you from your position or dim your light. The lighthouse never questions whether it should keep shining during storms. It simply shines because that's its purpose and nature. You should approach your goals, your values, and your contribution with the same unwavering commitment and clarity of purpose. The lighthouse doesn't shine conditionally, only when conditions are perfect or when it feels like shining. It shines consistently because that's what lighthouses do. You should pursue your goals, live your values, and serve others with the same unconditional commitment, regardless of your moods, circumstances, or temporary setbacks. These three metaphors, the sculptor, the river, and the lighthouse, represent different essential aspects of your journey toward mastery and fulfillment. As the sculptor, you shape yourself intentionally through deliberate daily actions and conscious choices. As the river, you flow persistently toward your goals while adapting intelligently to obstacles and changing conditions. As the lighthouse, you stand firm on timeless principles while guiding others through your consistent example and unwavering character. But these metaphors also work together synergistically, each one supporting and strengthening the others. The sculptor needs the river's patience and persistence to complete the masterpiece over time. The river needs the lighthouse's unwavering direction and clear destination to reach its ultimate goal. The lighthouse needs the sculptor's intentional refinement and careful construction to maintain its strength and effectiveness. When you integrate these three approaches consciously and consistently, you become virtually unstoppable in pursuing your goals and realizing your potential. You develop the sculptor's clear intention and purposeful action, the river's persistence and adaptability, and the lighthouse's stability and inspiring influence. You shape yourself with conscious purpose, flow around obstacles with creative patience, and stand firm on principles with quiet confidence. This integration manifests in your daily life through conscious choice and deliberate practice. When you wake up each morning, you can choose to think like a sculptor. What am I creating today through my choices and actions? What aspects of my character or capabilities need to be refined? What elements of my current situation need to be removed or transformed? When you encounter challenges, setbacks, or obstacles during the day, you can choose to think like a river. How can I flow around this obstacle creatively? What's the path of least resistance toward my goal? How can I maintain my momentum while adapting to these changing conditions? When you face criticism, pressure, social opposition, or uncertainty, you can choose to think like a lighthouse. What are my core principles and non-negotiable values? How can I maintain my position while continuing to shine my light brightly? What guidance can I provide through my example rather than through my words or arguments? These metaphors become integrated into your identity when you practice them consistently over time. You begin to see yourself naturally as someone who creates rather than merely consumes, someone who flows persistently rather than forces aggressively, someone who guides through example rather than follows the crowd. This identity shift changes everything about how you approach challenges, opportunities, relationships, and daily decisions. The sculptor identity makes you naturally patient with your own development and intentional about your choices. You understand deeply that masterpieces require time, effort, and patience, and that every action contributes to your final form. You become comfortable with the slow, steady process of improvement because you know that lasting change happens gradually through consistent effort, rather than dramatically through sporadic bursts of activity. The river identity makes you naturally persistent in the face of obstacles and flexible in your methods while remaining firm in your ultimate direction. You understand that setbacks are temporary detours rather than permanent barriers. You become comfortable with finding alternative paths and developing new capabilities because you know that there's always a way forward for those who keep flowing with purpose and persistence. The lighthouse identity makes you naturally stable in your principles and influential through your consistent example. You understand that true leadership comes from standing firm on solid ground rather than chasing every trend, opinion, or opportunity. You become comfortable with being different from the crowd because you know that someone must provide guidance and direction in times of confusion and chaos. When these three identities work together harmoniously in your daily life, you develop what Hill called definiteness of purpose, not just intellectual clarity about what you want to achieve, but deep certainty about who you are and how you approach the journey toward your goals. You become someone who creates their circumstances rather than merely responding to them, someone who influences their environment rather than being controlled by it, someone who leads by example rather than by persuasion, argument, or manipulation. This is the person you're becoming through the consistent application of Hill's principles over time. Not someone who hopes for success and waits for luck, but someone who systematically creates success through proven methods. Not someone who reacts to circumstances with emotion and confusion, but someone who shapes circumstances with intention and clarity. Not someone who follows the crowd toward mediocrity, but someone who lights the way for others to follow toward excellence. The sculptor, the river, and the lighthouse live within you right now as potential identities waiting to be activated through conscious choice and consistent practice. The question that determines your future isn't whether you have the capability to embody these identities. You do. The question is which identity you will choose to embody today, this week, this month, and this year through your actions, decisions, and responses to circumstances. Which identity will guide your choices when you face setbacks and obstacles? Which metaphor will shape your actions when opportunities arise that require risk, effort, or change? Which approach will determine your response when others criticize your goals, question your methods, or doubt your ability to succeed? The answer you give through your behavior, rather than your words, determines not just what you achieve, but who you become in the process of achieving it. Consider how profoundly your life would change if you truly embodied the sculptor's mindset in your daily decisions. Every morning you would wake up with clear intention about what you're creating through that day's choices. You would see every experience as either contributing to your masterpiece or detracting from it. You would approach challenges as opportunities to refine your character and develop your capabilities. You would view setbacks as information about what needs to be adjusted, rather than evidence of failure or inadequacy. You would become incredibly selective about how you spend your time, energy, and attention, because you would understand that these are the tools you use to sculpt your life. You would eliminate activities, relationships, and habits that don't contribute to your vision. You would invest more deeply in experiences that develop your character and advance your goals. You would see every day as an opportunity to make progress rather than just to get through another day. Imagine how your approach to obstacles and challenges would transform if you fully embraced the river's wisdom in your thinking and behavior. Instead of seeing setbacks as personal failures or evidence that you should quit, you would see them as natural parts of the landscape that require creative navigation. Instead of trying to force solutions through willpower and aggression, you would look for paths of intelligent persistence that achieve your objectives with less friction and stress. You would develop remarkable patience with the process of achievement, understanding that meaningful goals take time to accomplish, and that persistence over time is more powerful than intensity in short bursts. You would become incredibly adaptable in your methods while remaining absolutely committed to your destination. You would stop wasting energy on things you can't control and focus all your power on things you can influence. Consider the impact on your relationships and influence if you genuinely lived according to the lighthouse principle. Instead of trying to convince people through argument or persuasion, you would influence them through the consistent example of your character and achievements. Instead of changing your values to fit in with different groups, you would maintain your principles and attract people who respect your authenticity and consistency. You would stop taking responsibility for other people's choices while taking complete responsibility for your own example. You would provide guidance to those who seek it while respecting others' freedom to make their own decisions and learn from their own experiences. You would become a source of stability and wisdom that others could rely on during uncertain times. But the real transformation happens when these three identities integrate completely into your way of being in the world. You begin to naturally think like someone who creates rather than someone who merely consumes. You automatically approach challenges like someone who finds solutions rather than someone who makes excuses. You instinctively respond to opportunities like someone who takes action rather than someone who hesitates and overanalyzes. This integration occurs through what psychologists call embodied cognition, when your identity and your actions become so aligned that you no longer have to think consciously about how to respond to situations. Your responses emerge naturally from who you've become rather than from who you're trying to be. You don't have to force yourself to be persistent. Persistence becomes your natural response to obstacles. You don't have to remind yourself to be intentional. Intentionality becomes your automatic approach to decisions. The sculptor identity becomes embodied when you naturally ask yourself, "What am I creating?" before making decisions. The river identity becomes embodied when you automatically look for the path of intelligent persistence when facing challenges. The lighthouse identity becomes embodied when you instinctively stand firm on your principles regardless of external pressure or temporary disadvantages. When this integration is complete, you no longer have to work hard to maintain these approaches. They become effortless expressions of who you are. People notice something different about how you carry yourself, how you respond to difficulties, and how you pursue your goals. They see someone who knows where they're going and how to get there, someone who remains calm under pressure, someone who creates value rather than just consuming it. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen through positive thinking or mental visualization alone. It happens through consistent practice of these identities in real-world situations over extended periods of time. Every time you choose to respond like a sculptor, instead of reacting like a victim, you strengthen that identity. Every time you choose to flow like a river, instead of forcing like a bulldozer, you embody that wisdom more deeply. Every time you choose to stand like a lighthouse instead of swaying like a reed, you develop that stability more completely. The practice is simple but not easy. It requires conscious choice when unconscious reaction would be easier. It requires patience when impatience feels more natural. It requires persistence when quitting would be more comfortable. It requires standing firm when compromising would be more convenient. But each time you choose the harder path that aligns with these identities, you become more capable of choosing it again in the future. Start today by choosing one identity that resonates most strongly with your current situation and challenges. If you feel scattered and reactive, focus on the sculptor's intentionality. If you feel stuck and frustrated, embrace the river's persistence and adaptability. If you feel uncertain and influenced by others' opinions, cultivate the lighthouse's stability and principle-centered living. Practice that identity consistently for 30 days, making decisions and responding to situations from that perspective. Notice how it changes your experience, your results, and your sense of personal power. Pay attention to how others respond to you differently when you embody these qualities consistently. Observe how your confidence and clarity increase when your actions align with these powerful metaphors. After 30 days of focused practice with one identity, begin integrating the second, then the third, until all three become natural aspects of how you think, feel, and act in the world. This is not about perfection. It's about progress. It's not about never making mistakes. It's about making mistakes from a position of strength rather than weakness, from intention rather than reaction, from principle rather than convenience. The sculptor, the river, and the lighthouse are not just metaphors. They are blueprints for becoming the kind of person who naturally creates the life they envision. They are not just concepts to understand intellectually. They are identities to embody practically through daily choice and consistent action. Which identity will you choose to practice first? Which metaphor speaks most directly to what you need to develop in your current situation? Which approach would create the greatest positive change in your life if you embodied it consistently for the next month? The choice is yours, and the time to begin is now. Your future self is waiting for you to become the sculptor, the river, and the lighthouse. Your potential is waiting for you to claim these identities through practice rather than just appreciate them through understanding. In the silence between thoughts lies infinite power waiting to be accessed. In the pause between stimulus and response lies unlimited choice waiting to be exercised. In the space between what happens to you and how you react exists the freedom that most people never discover, never develop, and never use to transform their lives. You are about to master this space, and in mastering it, you master everything that matters for creating the life you truly want, rather than settling for whatever circumstances provide. The highest level of Hill's principles isn't found in frantic action, constant motion, or aggressive pursuit. It's found in the quality of consciousness that guides all action. It's not ultimately what you do that determines your success. It's the awareness, intention, and wisdom from which you do it. The final rule of power is learning to operate from the calm, clear center of your being, where clarity is natural rather than forced, wisdom is accessible rather than hidden, and right action emerges effortlessly rather than through struggle and strain. Silence is your secret weapon in a world that has forgotten how to be quiet, how to think deeply, and how to access the wisdom that only emerges in stillness. While others react immediately and emotionally to every provocation, you pause and respond thoughtfully. While they respond from anxiety, anger, or impulse, you respond from wisdom, clarity, and purpose. While they scatter their mental energy through constant noise, distraction, and stimulation, you concentrate your power through strategic stillness and intentional quiet. This isn't about becoming passive, withdrawn, or disengaged from life. This is about becoming so centered, so clear and so purposeful that your actions carry maximum impact with minimum wasted effort. This is about developing the capacity to think clearly when others are confused, to remain calm when others are agitated, and to make wise decisions when others are reacting emotionally. Practice the art of strategic silence in your daily interactions and communications. When someone criticizes your work, your ideas, or your character, don't defend immediately or argue reflexively. Pause deliberately and consider whether their criticism contains useful information that could help you improve. When someone makes you a business offer, a relationship proposal, or any significant opportunity, don't accept or reject immediately based on emotion. Pause thoughtfully and evaluate whether it aligns with your long-term goals and core values. When someone provokes you intentionally or unintentionally, when they say something designed to trigger an emotional reaction, don't react immediately from hurt, anger, or defensiveness. Pause strategically and choose your response based on what serves your highest interests, rather than what satisfies your immediate emotions. This pause isn't hesitation, weakness, or uncertainty. It's mastery, strength, and wisdom. It's the difference between being controlled by your circumstances, like a puppet controlled by strings, and controlling your response to circumstances, like a master craftsman selecting the perfect tool for each situation. In that brief moment of silence before responding, you access wisdom that reactive people never discover. You find solutions that emotional responses never reveal. You maintain your power and dignity while others give theirs away through impulsive reactions. Extend this practice to your relationship with information consumption and external stimulation. Create daily periods of complete silence where you disconnect from all external input. No phone notifications, no background music, no television, no conversation, no reading, no podcasts. Just you and your own consciousness, your own thoughts, your own inner wisdom. In these moments of complete quiet, you'll discover something profound. Your mind, when not constantly fed external stimulus and distraction, begins to generate insights, solutions, and clarity that no amount of information consumption can provide. You'll find that your best ideas, your most creative solutions, and your clearest direction often emerge not when you're actively seeking them, but when you create space for them to surface naturally. The most successful people throughout history understood this principle intuitively. They didn't just work hard, they worked from a place of inner stillness that guided their efforts intelligently. They didn't just gather information compulsively, they created space for wisdom to emerge organically. They didn't just react to opportunities frantically, they cultivated the awareness to recognize opportunities that others missed completely, and the wisdom to know which opportunities were worth pursuing. But mastery requires more than strategic silence. It requires the development of what ancient philosophers called holy indifference, and what Hill understood as freedom from attachment to specific outcomes. This doesn't mean you don't care about results, or that you become apathetic about your goals. It means you care more about the process than the results, more about who you become than what you achieve, more about your inner state than your external circumstances. When you become emotionally attached to specific outcomes, when you need things to happen in a particular way within a particular time frame, you give away your power to circumstances beyond your control. When you require other people to behave according to your expectations, you become frustrated and disappointed when they act independently according to their own values and priorities. This attachment to outcomes is the source of most human suffering and the greatest obstacle to sustained success and inner peace. Practice giving your absolute best effort while releasing attachment to results completely. Prepare thoroughly and skillfully for your important presentation, then deliver it with confidence and presence, without being emotionally attached to the audience's response or the immediate outcome. Build your business with excellence, dedication, and strategic thinking. Then release your need for it to grow at a specific pace or achieve particular milestones according to your preferred timeline. Treat people with genuine kindness, respect, and consideration, then release your expectation that they'll treat you the same way in return. Provide value, solve problems, and contribute meaningfully. Then release your need for recognition, appreciation, or reward from specific people or institutions. Do excellent work for its own sake, then let the results unfold naturally without trying to control or manipulate outcomes. This isn't resignation, lowered standards, or lack of ambition. It's liberation from the anxiety, frustration, and disappointment that come from trying to control things that aren't controllable. When you're not emotionally invested in controlling things you can't control, you have more energy, clarity, and focus to invest in things you can control. When you're not anxious about outcomes, you make better decisions about actions. When you're not dependent on external validation, you develop unshakable inner confidence based on your own standards and values. The paradox of detachment is that it often leads to better results than attachment, because detachment eliminates the desperation, neediness, and emotional charge that repel the very things you're trying to attract. When you're not desperate for something to work, you approach it with clearer thinking and better judgment. When you're not afraid of failure, you take more intelligent risks and learn more quickly from setbacks. When you're not seeking approval from others, you make choices based on your own wisdom rather than other people's opinions or expectations. But detachment from outcomes must be balanced with deep attachment to principles, values, and character. While you release your grip on how things should happen, you strengthen your commitment to how you should behave, regardless of circumstances. Your principles become your anchor in a world of constant change and uncertainty. Your values become your guidance system when external circumstances are unclear or conflicting. Develop non-negotiable daily practices that connect you to your highest principles regardless of external conditions, circumstances, or feelings. Begin each day with gratitude, not because your life is perfect or because you feel grateful, but because gratitude shifts your consciousness toward abundance, possibility, and appreciation rather than scarcity, limitation, and complaint. Spend time in meditation, contemplation, or quiet reflection, not to escape reality or avoid responsibility, but to connect with the deeper intelligence that guides your best decisions and most creative solutions. This doesn't require any particular spiritual belief or religious practice. It simply requires regular periods of quiet, where you can access wisdom that emerges when your analytical mind stops trying to control everything. Practice acts of service without expectation of return, not because you're a saint or because you don't have your own needs and goals, but because giving without attachment develops your capacity for detached action and connects you to something greater than your individual concerns. This could be as simple as helping a colleague solve a problem, volunteering for a cause you care about, or supporting someone who's struggling with challenges you've overcome. Exercise your body regularly and systematically, not just for physical health and appearance, but because physical discipline develops the mental discipline needed for mastery in every area of life. When you can make yourself do what you should do when you don't feel like doing it, you develop the capacity to apply this same discipline to your career, relationships, finances, and personal development. Read literature that challenges and elevates your thinking, not for entertainment or escapism, but to keep your mind connected to higher possibilities and to learn from people who've achieved what you want to achieve. Choose books that stretch your understanding, expand your perspective, and provide practical wisdom you can apply to your current challenges and opportunities. These practices aren't about becoming a better person in some distant future. They're about accessing the wisdom and power that already exist within you right now. They're about removing the mental and emotional static that prevents you from operating at your highest level. They're about creating internal conditions that make success natural rather than forced, effortless rather than stressful. The highest form of self-discipline isn't forcing yourself to do things you don't want to do through willpower and determination. It's aligning your actions with your deepest values so that doing the right thing becomes natural and effortless rather than difficult and conflicted. When your daily practices connect you to your highest principles, you don't have to rely on motivation or willpower to make good choices. Good choices emerge automatically from your elevated state of consciousness. Master this, and you master everything that matters for creating a life of meaning, impact, and fulfillment. When you can maintain inner stillness in the midst of external chaos, nothing can disturb your peace or clarity. When you can act without attachment to outcomes, nothing can shake your confidence or derail your progress. When your actions emerge from principle rather than emotion, nothing can lead you astray from your true path. Let's trace the complete journey you've traveled through these principles and see how far you've come. You began by transforming your relationship with failure, learning to see setbacks as valuable information rather than evidence of inadequacy. You converted your vague desires into burning obsessions through clarity, specificity, and emotional intensity. You accelerated your progress through decisive action based on clear criteria rather than endless analysis and second-guessing. You built specialized knowledge in areas that matter most to your success, rather than scattering your learning across irrelevant topics. You organized effort through strategic relationships and systematic collaboration, rather than trying to achieve everything through individual effort alone. You gained control of your mental environment by carefully choosing your inputs and creating space for wisdom to emerge, rather than consuming whatever information happened to be most available or entertaining. You connected with infinite intelligence through regular periods of contemplation and intuitive problem-solving, rather than relying only on logical analysis and conscious reasoning. You learned to sculpt yourself through intentional daily actions, to flow like water around obstacles while maintaining direction, and to stand like a lighthouse on principles while guiding others through example. You discovered the power of silence in a noisy world and the freedom that comes from detachment to outcomes while maintaining commitment to principles. These aren't just techniques you've learned or concepts you understand, they're capabilities you've developed and powers you now possess. They're not just theories you believe, they're realities you can create through consistent application. But knowledge without action remains powerless regardless of how profound or accurate it might be. Understanding without application stays worthless regardless of how complete or detailed it becomes. Insight without implementation produces no results regardless of how brilliant or inspired it appears. You now have all the tools, frameworks, and understanding you need, but tools only work when they're used consistently and skillfully by someone who's committed to creating results rather than just collecting information. The moment you finish reading these words, your transformation either begins in earnest or remains a fantasy that you think about but never act upon. The instant you close this chapter, you either start applying these principles systematically or you return to the patterns that have kept you stuck in mediocrity. The second you put down this material, you either become someone who creates their life consciously and intentionally, or someone who lets life happen to them randomly and reactively. Your future success isn't determined by your circumstances, your background, your resources, or your current situation. It's determined by how consistently and skillfully you apply the principles you've learned. Your achievement isn't limited by your current situation, your past failures, your lack of connections, or other people's expectations. It's limited only by your commitment to daily practice of proven methods, rather than hoping for luck, waiting for motivation, or expecting circumstances to improve automatically. The people who will outperform you in the next 5 years aren't necessarily smarter, more talented, better educated, or better connected than you are. They're simply more consistent in applying fundamental principles to their daily choices and actions. They've made success a daily practice rather than a distant dream. They've made excellence a habit rather than an occasional occurrence that happens when they feel motivated or when conditions are perfect. You now possess the same principles that created every fortune, built every empire, achieved every breakthrough, and realized every dream in human history. These principles don't care about your age, your education, your background, or your starting point. They don't care about your current financial situation, your relationship status, or your career history. They only care about your application, consistency, and commitment to practicing them, regardless of circumstances, feelings, or temporary setbacks. The principles don't respond to your wishes, hopes, good intentions, or New Year's resolutions. They only respond to your consistent, purposeful action over extended periods of time. They don't care whether you believe in them, understand them completely, or feel confident about applying them. They only care whether you actually apply them systematically and persistently until results become inevitable. The choice that determines everything comes down to this fundamental decision. Will you be someone who knows what to do or someone who does what they know? Will you be someone who understands success principles or someone who creates success through applying principles? Will you be someone who talks about transformation or someone who lives transformation daily through conscious choice and disciplined action? Every morning when you wake up, you get to choose who you'll be that day. You can choose to think like Hill instead of like everyone else. You can choose to act on principle instead of emotion, impulse, or convenience. You can choose to create your circumstances instead of merely reacting to them. You can choose to build something meaningful instead of just consuming what others have built. Every challenge you face becomes an opportunity to apply these principles and prove to yourself that they work. Every setback becomes a chance to demonstrate your new relationship with failure. Every decision becomes a moment to practice decisive action. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to influence through example rather than argument or persuasion. The world needs people who understand these principles and live them consistently rather than just collecting them intellectually. Society needs individuals who think clearly in confused times, who act with purpose in chaotic circumstances, who lead by example in environments dominated by poor examples. Your success isn't just about your personal achievement. It's about what your example makes possible for others who are watching, learning, and deciding whether they believe transformation is possible. When you master these 7 rules consistently and completely, nothing and no one can shake your foundation or dim your light. External circumstances may change unpredictably, but your inner foundation remains solid and unshakable. Other people may disappoint you, but your principles sustain you regardless of their choices. Temporary setbacks may occur, but your long-term trajectory remains upward because it's based on laws rather than luck. You are no longer at the mercy of circumstances you didn't create or events you can't predict. You are no longer dependent on other people's choices for your success or happiness. You are no longer limited by your past mistakes or intimidated by your future challenges. You are the sculptor who shapes reality through intention, the river that flows toward goals with persistence, and the lighthouse that guides others through consistent example. The time for preparation is over. The time for hesitation has passed. The time for application has begun. The time for transformation is now. When you master these principles, when you embody these identities, when you live these truths consistently, nothing and no one can abate you, shake you, or stop you from creating the life you envision and achieving the goals that matter most to you.